Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this year's school year kickoff for pipeline programs. To participate in today's webinar, you'll have an opportunity to use the chat function in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. If you have any technical questions at all, please select panelist, and our colleague running the webinar will make every attempt to answer your questions and get you online and with the group. To ask questions of the speakers, please select the option for panelists and participants. A recording is in progress, and this recording will be emailed to those who registered about 48 hours after today's presentation, along with the slides and a few of the resources which we are going to reference today. Before we dive into our agenda, for those of you whom I don't know, I am Joy Dingle, the Director of Legal Diversity Pipeline Programs at Street Law, Inc., and we're really pleased that you could join us today. What we'll be doing after some brief introductions is a quick review of our program components, and then we'll get to a lot of the questions that many of you have had as you gear up for this year's programs. We'll talk about changing protocols and practices, how to produce an inclusive learning environment, and we'll pass along some tips for effective teaching and making those really critical connections so that you are feeling ready to go for your programs this semester and in the spring. Last but not least, we will have an opportunity for the audience to ask additional questions, and we will conclude with some closing remarks and ways to keep in touch with us. We would love to hear where you are and how you're connected to Street Law. So I know many partner teachers are joining us, also volunteers and site leaders, friends of Street Law. So please share your affiliation and your location in the chat. Great, we're seeing people from everywhere. New York City, South Dakota, Dallas, Orlando, Austin, Cincinnati, Plano, New York, the Bay Area, here in DC. Wonderful. Excellent, it's so great to see so many of you. And I'm glad so many of you from west of us are able to join today. Great, lots of familiar names and a couple of you who are new to us as well, so welcome to all of you. Terrific, thanks everyone, and please continue to introduce yourselves in the chat if you have not yet had the opportunity. We have an introduction of our own. I'm really pleased to introduce our new team member, my colleague, Ms. Bianca Rizzio. She is our new program coordinator. And Bianca is going to tell you a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Joy. And hi, everyone. I'm Bianca. It's great to meet you. I am excited to collaborate as the new program coordinator for Street Law. I'm from Vermont and recently relocated to Baltimore, coming from the world of juvenile and restorative justice with a background in teaching skill building classes for young people. So I'm energized about the opportunity to support you all in your efforts. And I'm just going to take a brief moment to review my role a little bit and help you all understand how you can utilize me moving forward. So please come to me with any questions you may have. I'm here to assist you with resource access, specifically the e-library and templates and lessons. I'll also help interpret and share back student feedback that you're receiving and gather updates about how things are going, troubleshoot as needed, and ultimately share successes with the community at large as well. So just to reiterate, the most important part, ask me questions. Even if I don't have an answer, I commit to finding you one, and quickly at that. As I've been learning in my onboarding process, this is really an incredible program that could not be possible without you all. So it's my intention to make sure you get everything you need to make it happen. So Joy has shared my contact information and it will be made available to you after this again. I know we'll be connecting in the future and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Bianca. Welcome aboard, and we are excited to work with you. I do want to do a quick review of our program components, especially for new members of our audience, and also for those of you who need a little refresher. The Legal Diversity Pipeline Program has 3 major components: the classroom visits, which many of you are currently gearing up for and planning. That's where a lot of the introductory materials written by Street Law are introduced to the students. You have an opportunity to meet them and explore those topics. Those are followed by the workshops, which again are the companion to the lessons. The workshops are critical to the success of the program because that's where the legal simulations take place that are connected to that introductory material. Again, we've got a full library of lots of different lessons and workshops that work in tandem for you. So if you have been with us for a little while and haven't looked at the list recently, we do encourage you to go to the eLibrary and take a look at those, or if you're just looking to mix things up. And if you are new to us, by all means, please ask Bianca for that access to the eLibrary, and we would be happy to give you a brief tour and let you know what's available. Last but not least, the other important component here is the opportunity to explore career pathways with the students. So many students are not aware of the multiple opportunities that are available to them in the law. And many of you in the audience know that there is no one way to have a successful entry into the law or to have a successful career. And so we want you to be able to carve out time and to explore those things together so that students can ask as many questions as possible. Many of you asked us what successful pipeline sites did last year. Obviously, last year was a pretty tough year. The pandemic took all of us by surprise, and many of you on this call and many others out in the audience did have an opportunity to move forward. And here's some of the things that they did well. They did communicate their expectations very early on and clearly. So that everybody who was involved in this joint effort had a roadmap for where to go and had backups just in case something did change. And we know for many of us, those things did change unexpectedly, but that's how they made it through. Also, those successful students were able to pique students' curiosity before the program started. And so what we've done is we are continuing to make available our student-facing flyer. And Bianca, when you have an opportunity, if you would put that in the chat so everybody can see the link for that. We developed that a little bit earlier this year, and it continues to be available to all of you, regardless of which format your program is going to take. You may share this with students before they start the program, so they have an idea of what to expect and just to get those juices flowing. So another thing that you all did especially well was have students be involved in a little bit of the process. In some cases, it was appropriate to have them select topics. Often our partner teachers already had an idea of the topics they might like to explore with the help of the volunteers. And so you all would make a short list of things and then present those to the students so they could choose what they were really excited about. If that's something that can work at your site, I encourage you to do that. Another thing that worked really well was having students nominate their own classmates, their own peers to take on speaking roles. That way, students felt honored, and they also felt that their classmates were counting on them, but they also knew that they would have a really active and listening and engaged audience because they were taking on the speaking roles. So again, if that's something that our partner teachers think would work especially well, by all means. And last but not least, for those critical career questions that come up, a lot of students appreciated having a little bit of time in advance to prepare those questions. So if partner teachers are interested in carving out a little bit of class time for students to do that, and it makes sense for your class, by all means do that. Also, many volunteers did actually share their biographies. If they are already available online, you can share them in the online format. Or if you don't have a biography, or the one that you use professionally is fairly lengthy, a lot of sites decided that they would designate a volunteer to actually collect up short biographies. Those that were pared down a little bit, that may have included 3 to 5 sentences that really sum up your professional role. And then once those were compiled, those were shared with the students in advance. So they got a reminder of the work that you do on a daily basis, and then they could formulate questions starting with that. Once those questions started rolling in, then students could think of related questions, and then the conversations flowed really freely. So those are some things that worked really well. Last but not least, a lot of you used visuals and a lot of creative touches last year to really help things come along. Some of you actually got into character. We saw many volunteers playing the roles of Supreme Court justices, for example, or dressing up as famous people within the law. A lot of you used colorful backgrounds. Some of you included music. All sorts of special touches. A couple of you also gathered up students' names, for example, and made them into a slide, celebrating students' accomplishments. Whatever comes to mind, if it's easy for you to do and it adds that special touch, that definitely gets students engaged. And last but not least, when it came to implementing the various components of the program, those sites that were successful actually checked for understanding while the learning was going on, gave students plenty of wait time, and then also encourage students to share their feedback after the program. That way, sites know what they're doing well and not so well, and each year you're not having to reinvent the wheel. So Bianca, if you would, please drop in the link for the teaching tips video, which is available to our audience as well. Thanks so much. And this video is short. It is about 8 minutes. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it's a really great refresher for the types of approaches that you want to use when you're teaching students. And again, those work successfully, whether you are holding an in-person program this year or an online program. They apply under all circumstances. And of course, if you have any questions about those after you've had a chance to look at them, please get in touch with us. Okay, so for those of you who are thinking about an in-person program for this year, we want to remind you that there are 3 new lessons and companion workshops available. Under intellectual property, there is a new option for patents and inventions. Under contracts, there is an option available for real estate. And there is also an environmental law topic which is available. We have lessons and workshops for those. These were all developed and vetted in 2019, but as we all know, as we rolled them out in person in 2020, some of you wanted to use these and did not have the opportunity necessarily. So they will look new to you. And so we encourage you to go ahead and if these are of interest to our partner teachers, to our volunteers, to our various sites, go ahead and give those a try. Those are available in the e-library. Or if you're just looking to refresh and try something new, those are available to you along with the existing lessons and workshops. Okay, so what a lot of you have been contacting us about is figuring out whether you should do an in-person program at all this year. And as always, it is up to each site to make this determination. But what we ask you to keep in mind is guidance from your local and state authorities, and also whatever your specific organizations or schools are saying about around COVID and the types of policies that are in place, you're going to want to follow those and consider those and weigh those carefully. And most important, you want to consider the total safety and comfort of those who are going to be involved in the program. So we know it's really tough to make this decision. If you want to talk with us at any point, and some of you already have, and some of you have scheduled appointments to talk with us about this, we're certainly available to you. Ultimately, the decision is yours, but if it would be helpful to consult with someone and do some talking out loud to figure out where you stand, we are certainly here as a resource. So next, for those of you who are going to move forward in person, the main questions are, okay, well, now that we may have permission and we can move forward, what should we do to maintain safety? Well, a lot of these things will seem pretty straightforward, but they are worth visiting. Definitely, we want you to follow the guidelines provided by the CDC and whatever policies are specific to your location. Also, communication is always critical within this program, but especially this year because scenarios are changing fairly quickly. And if a location has a sudden change or there's some sort of shift in COVID policy, you want to make sure that partner teachers are communicating really clearly with the volunteers and the host company or firm, and that if school leadership needs to be involved in providing some guidance as well, those people need to be in the loop. So we ask for regular contact. It's something that you can do through email. You can certainly call or text each other, or if you want to set up a regular check-in each week, whatever works best for your site. We do encourage that constant update of information so that everybody knows where things stand, and if students and families need to be alerted, then everybody's on the same page about what that information needs to be and how everybody needs to be alerted. So last but not least, we are asking that there be a little bit more contact with students and families, especially because things are changing fairly quickly, and you all know best how to communicate that, but we do want you to keep that in mind. So one of the main issues is, well, can we do the usual activities? And a lot of this will depend upon the guidance from your organization and whatever your local conditions are. But we're fairly certain that in most cases, there will be a need for masking and social distancing. Also, you do want to plan ahead and be sure that your venue can accommodate the additional need for space. So if you've been accustomed to holding your program in a certain place, you do want to make sure that you can hold a similar number of people in that space who are also distanced. In some cases, for those of you, especially who are in a warmer climate, and if weather conditions are going to permit, you may want to do some or all of your activities actually in an outdoor space. So what I mean by this is that if your particular building has something such as a courtyard or has a rooftop, and it is appropriate, you have permission to use that kind of space, there's nothing that stops you from using it, but you do want to be aware that everybody can see and hear well. So I would encourage you to gather up some volunteers or some colleagues and actually try out that space to make sure that everybody can see and hear from different vantage points. And one thing that can help with communication, should you decide to use this option, is to provide large boards so that students and volunteers can do some note taking, write things out, have additional signage so groups know where to meet, or they know, for example, group A will be in this part of the space, group B will be in this part of the space, so that the person who's directing things doesn't have to do a lot of yelling or a lot of repeats of information. What they can do is have a lot of this written out after they give the oral instructions first. So if there are any questions about that, please, by all means, put your questions into the chat and we can talk a little bit more about that. Okay, for those of you who are moving forward with an in-person program, one of the huge questions, especially for this program, you're hosting lots of teenagers, so what do you do about meals and snacks for them and for your volunteers and other special guests who are joining? We're going to encourage everybody with the masking and the distancing when folks are not eating. Obviously, you want to encourage everybody to wash their hands, provide hand sanitizer wherever possible. And we do want to encourage you to use or serve individual servings or box lunches in this case, as opposed to what many sites were doing pre-COVID, where there were communal platters or bowls. While it does take away from some of the nice touches that we like to see at these events, in this case, you want to err on the side of caution and use individually packaged food and beverages wherever possible. We do understand, though, that the cost of doing this can be somewhat prohibitive. It's a lot different than if you just order something in bulk and then have the servings. So if that's going to be the case for your site, then we do encourage you to designate 1 or 2 adults who are going to be responsible for actually using safety practices and then getting the food and beverages together, and then as opposed to having guests serve themselves. It just prevents the number of people who are touching the food or who have access to those individual servings. And for many sites, for example, ordering pizza is like a common way of taking care of lunch and often the least expensive. But because those kinds of items don't always come individually packaged, you'll have to go with the option of asking a volunteer or 2 to help with that. For those of you who think that you may be in a virtual situation, or at least for part of your program, students may be away from you. They may be remote, either learning from home or they're learning at school, but you still want to provide some sort of meals or snacks. You certainly are welcome to do that if your budgets allow, if you have the capacity to do that. Many sites actually did that successfully last year, where they got that information in advance and had food either delivered to the school or to students' homes. Again, just please double check school policies to make sure that this is acceptable. That's going to vary from place to place. And always ask about food allergies and dietary restrictions in advance so that everyone who is part of the event feels welcome. So another common question that we received is that in some cases, it is okay to have an in-person program, but there are some organizations which are not allowing outside visitors, so you all cannot host the typical field trip. So what can you do instead? So this is an unusual year, and so we've got to think creatively. So one thing that you may want to consider is actually visiting the school, provided that there is enough space and that outside visitors are allowed to do so. Obviously, it's different than having students have that experience of seeing your firm or your company for the first time. So one thing you might want to do to supplement that is actually include a brief video greeting. And you could do that from your reception area where you might have welcomed visitors, or you can do it from an office space that gives students an opportunity to see what your offices look like. We know that it's not a full substitute for being there, but it is a really great way of showing students where many of you work on a daily basis. So if that is something that is allowable by your organization's policies, by all means, go ahead and do that. In the alternative, if that is not going to work out for you, you may want to consider then hosting your workshops and your career activity online. A lot of you were telling us, well, if we do this online, will we lose some of the momentum? But one difference to online, once you all have had an opportunity to meet in person, is that you've already established that rapport, and it's actually much easier to have student buy-in once you've already met those students in person. So if it's more practical for you to have what we're calling a hybrid program, where part of your program is in person, let's say your classroom visits, but then you have to do part of your culminating activity online, that's certainly an opportunity that is available to you. And it will be different because you're actually not meeting everybody for the first time online. You've already established that connection. So the next most popular question that we've gotten is, for those programs that do intend to be virtual this year, you have to do things remotely. What can we do to see more students' faces? We know how challenging it was for many of you who did move forward with your programming last year, and you said, it was nice to hear the voices, but we really just saw blank squares, or we just saw people's names, and it's really not the same as being there. There are a couple of things that we'll remind you about. If a school district requires that students be allowed to have their cameras off for privacy reasons, then unfortunately there's not anything we can do to change that policy. However, many school districts have relaxed that policy and are now making the cameras on idea optional. If that is the case, then I encourage you to go back to some of the ideas that we mentioned earlier in this presentation about student engagement. If you're already able to get that excitement going, you're able to establish some of those connections earlier, it's going to be a lot easier to get the buy-in for cameras on. Also, if in cases where you're able, our partner teachers are able to talk with families in advance, if they can get some buy-in from parents, that's always really helpful too. That way, if it's an option and you have an adult in the home saying, this is a really great opportunity, it would really make sense for you to have your camera on, that can be very helpful. The one advantage for this year is that for students who are learning, if it turns out that you have to implement your program remotely, because more students are coming to school physically, because they are inside the school building, in most of those cases, there's not the same expectation of privacy. So in that case, students will actually have their cameras on can be encouraged in a very friendly way to keep them on by their partner teachers and others in the building. So that's the advice we offer to you. We do encourage you to move forward, even if you have to do all or part of your program virtually, and we would love to hear the feedback that you're getting so we can continue to share some of these ideas and tips with others. Let's do a quick review of what is available to those of you who will be moving forward in the virtual space. Last year, we did introduce 6 virtual lessons and workshops. Those continue to be available to you. So when you log into the Pipeline e-library, we want to remind you that all of the virtual materials, the lessons, the workshops, the career activities, et cetera, are available to you under the virtual tab. They are separate and apart from our traditional in-person lessons. So you will see those highlighted. And so when you click on that tab, it will have its own tab and you'll see those, so you can get to those directly. You will know that you're looking at a virtual lesson when you download it, and in the upper right-hand corner, it says virtual. All of our virtual materials are marked that way. So if you're looking at a lesson that you think is virtual but doesn't say that, then there's a very good chance that you're actually looking at a traditional in-person lesson, and I encourage you to go back to the e-library and find the virtual version. There are 6 topics available to you for virtual materials: advertising, contracts, cyberbullying, environmental law, the 4th Amendment, and sexual harassment. We got really great feedback on all of these materials last year. There are a number of supplements included with those virtual materials to help you present things visually. And we also redid many of the career activities in the virtual format as well. So please don't leave off that career component that is part of the end of your program just because you're going to be online. All those things are available to you. If you have any trouble finding those at all, you can always send an email to Bianca and she can give you some guidance. All right, seeing that there are no questions in the chat right at this moment, I do want to make sure that we review some of the issues connected to social emotional awareness. We all know that this has been incredibly tough. It's been an incredibly tough year and a half for all of us, especially for young people in our local communities. And so I do want to remind us all that we need to be aware of some of the challenges that students are facing. And as we bring more sensitivity to this, we want to make sure that we're still keeping our expectations high, but also realistic. A number of young people still continue to experience those challenges in terms of housing, access to food, changes in income. The past several months have been very difficult when it's come to natural disasters around the country, et cetera. So many students, although they are happy to be going back to school, are still very much in transition. Issues of racial injustice have not gone away. And also a lot of teenagers continue to take on a lot of family responsibilities or a need to work outside the home. So they are doing a very careful balance between those kinds of things as they attempt to pursue their high school education. And so many of you brought to our attention last year the number of students who are working, for example, and even while they were doing the program, they were trying to be at work and also tune in for what the program had to offer. Some students were trying to participate in the program using digital devices that were not ideal. Some were trying to actually log in from their phones. Some students also were facing some barriers because English may not be their first language and they needed some supplemental materials. And there are also students with disabilities who are facing challenges because they did not necessarily have access to some of the traditional services that they do when they in a year that is not disrupted. So if any of those present a challenge for your site specifically, first start the dialogue with the school. Our partner teachers have been exceptional, and I know a number of you are online now, in terms of being aware of these types of issues and alerting volunteers. But this is not something that should fall just to our partner teachers. This is something that all of us should be aware of. And if you have any questions or concerns about this, please get in touch with me. I'd be more than happy to talk with you about this. And then also along the lines of diversity and inclusion, we've talked about this briefly before, and it always is worthy of mentioning again. Those of you who are successful, this past year and have been consistent over the years are doing things well. And I think it's important to point out what you're doing well so you can repeat this. We know for the feedback that we're hearing that when students feel that they are being treated respectfully, they are treated as if they are capable learners, even if they are facing challenges. And when their lived experiences are being respected, they feel more engaged, they feel more inspired by all of you, they feel encouraged by the words that you share with them. And so we want to be here as your cheering section to encourage you to continue doing these things. We also want to continue the types of dialogue that are popping up from our various programs around a variety of issues. Sometimes they're around the topics that you're actually exploring, sometimes they're around current events. Even when there are differences of opinion, this is a great way for adults to model the kind of civility that we want to see when we're having those kinds of exchanges. So please see all of these as opportunities to engage students and to develop them professionally, and also ways of having students feel that they are included in their own learning process, and that they are front and center in their own learning, but they are also feeling that they are being welcomed by professionals who may be in their future profession. That's certainly our hope. A few more tips for teaching effectively. These are critical to your success, and many of you have been doing these well. Communication continues to be everything. So those of you who are volunteering, especially for the first time, take a good look at those materials. Make sure that you are clear on the direction you want to take with them. If you're making changes, make sure you're in touch with your partner teachers. Our partner teachers have been really great about providing additional tips that will make you effective, whether you're in person or online. Street Law also has some extra tips for you. Those were already in the chat, I believe, so make sure you take a look at that video. Also, we do encourage you to do a lot of listening and let students do a lot of the talking. Wait time really matters a lot. Also, giving students that opportunity to think through what they want to say before they say it matters a lot. So the legal concepts may come easily to us, but students always need a little bit more time with that. So please be patient with them, but also be patient with yourselves. This year is not the typical year, and so it's okay for all of us to pause and take a deep breath. And if we need to change direction, if we need to describe things again, or we need to try a different approach, that is perfectly okay. We are not here to show students that we are perfect. We're here to show students that we care and that we are part of a profession that is a fulfilling one, an exciting one, a very important one, and that we're all in this together. Okay, a lot of you did ask us about ways to continue to create those connections. And so these are the ideas that we want to continue to share with you. If you are an organizational leader or are in touch with and can coordinate this with an organizational leader, by all means, encourage that person to make some opening or closing remarks for your program. This can be done in person, this can be done by video. They don't need to be lengthy. What they need to be is relevant to what students are learning and to what's happening today. And students gave us absolutely fantastic experience when they had an opportunity to meet a managing partner or to meet a general counsel or some of the decision makers in your organization who are responsible for keeping business moving forward during these challenging times. Students really felt flattered that individual would take time to recognize them. I continue to encourage them whenever possible. Welcome videos, warm-up activities, anything that you can do to add that little extra positive touch does make a huge difference for students. And they don't have to be fancy. They can be done on a phone. They can be in the form of a PowerPoint slide. What it's really about is just taking the time to show the human side of ourselves as professionals. And a lot of you have done this, but do make sure, please, that you continue to check in with your partner schools. and your teachers. Ask about the students, ask about how things are going this year. And if there is anything extra you can do, whether it's just words of encouragement or just taking an hour or two to follow up in some way, or some sort of campus activity, if you have that availability and that capacity, then please go right ahead. But just a friendly email can make a real difference when somebody's having a tough year. So please go ahead and check in. We have received so many great stories about students who really love the idea of the host organization checking back in with them. They said, wow, you know, they're still thinking about us. And it means a lot to us, especially in a year where they weren't necessarily able to have the regular school year that they had anticipated, but they knew that somebody was out there cheering for them. And we are certainly out here cheering for all of you. We very much appreciate your support of the program. Okay, I'm going to pause here. And if there are any particular questions on your minds or any ideas that you would like to share with the audience that have worked especially well for you, please take this opportunity. I'm going to use some wait time and let you all put some questions and comments into the chat. And while we're giving you an opportunity for that, Bianca, did we get to all of the links that we intended to share?
There are two more that I'm going to put in the chat now. So that first link in the chat that I did not label, sorry, is the student-facing flyer. We added the facilitator tips, and then I'm going to send you a guide to the student feedback form, as well as a sample letter to parents, and I'll put those in there now.
Thank you, Bianca, that's great. One of the questions that came from Christoph. Hi, Christoph, good to have you online with us. Yes, the slides for today will be included in the email that you will receive a couple days from now. So it's a great way to review and also share with your team members. And yes, those links will be included as well. So if you're not able to open some of the links now or able to bookmark them so you can look at them later, you will get those links as well. All right. Question from Dora. If we decide not to participate right now, when does the next session start in 2022? So some of that depends upon your partner school's schedule. But most schools will start their second term, or what they call their spring term, although in some parts of the country it's still cold. Most will start in January, sometimes in February. So that is a time when when students are prepared for their next semester and the program can be implemented then. Which means that those of you who are gearing up for a spring program, and I know some of you are with us because you're really excellent planners, what you'll want to do is, I would encourage you before Thanksgiving, actually make some preliminary plans, because by the time the holidays are upon us, it's just hard to get a lot of people together on a call to do some of that organizing. So if you are gearing up for that spring program, please get in touch with each other. And these are, you know, all the roads are two ways here, whether it's partner teachers, firms, companies, volunteers, whomever it may be. Start getting in touch with each other in advance of Thanksgiving, because then December is here and it's almost impossible to get something planned. So start doing some of that pre-planning before then. And if you even want to start now, there's nothing wrong with that. Some of you have already started. I see a question in Q&A from Mr. Castillo. Good to have you online. Hope things are going well on the West Coast. For exclusively online programs, would you still recommend a whole day program? Or or what would our visit be to the partner law firm? Okay, that is a fantastic question. So if you are going to have a virtual program, your classroom visits online will look pretty much the same, be roughly the same length that they are in person. But for your culminating activity, the time when students would have gone on a field trip, it's going to be really difficult to do that entire program, which can often be between 4 to 6 hours online. So what we've done is we've rewritten the workshops so that they are now in 2 parts. And so you plan out after your classroom visits, part 1 of the workshop would follow that online, and then at another time, part 2 of a workshop would follow that. And then following that, there would be an opportunity for a career component. So we've basically adapted all those things to fit the virtual space, but there's no one capstone activity. What most sites opted to end with was the career component, and online that takes about 30 to 45 minutes. And that's the time when you have the time for those follow-up career conversations, but also it's a great time for student recognition. So some sites put together an opportunity for students to share what they learned, or took some time to point out things that students did especially well, or they did something somewhat celebratory on top of that career component, and that's how they ended the program. So instead of having the 4 to 6 hour field trip, they just had what ended up being like a 45-minute to 60-minute virtual session. And if you have individual questions about that, please follow up with us, Mr. Castillo, and we encourage anybody who's online for this program, or we'll be watching it later, to follow up, and we can help you put together a timeline. Okay, and we still have a couple of minutes left for anyone who has questions.
Joy, I do see one question that John had asked a little earlier. Curious if students want to do a topic that isn't already developed, if there's flexibility to put something together on a new topic.
Got it. Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, John. The short answer is we would need to talk to you and figure out what the topic is and what it's all about. And if we have some existing materials that we can point you toward to help supplement that new topic, we will certainly do that. And whether it's in person or virtual, we can try to use something we already have to help provide that structure and use that as a launch pad. So John, do feel free to send an email or give us a call, and we will see what we can do about that. Also, we encourage people to take a look back at the e-library if you haven't looked there for a while. There are a lot of great topics that are available, so certainly check them out. Okay, I see a question from Jason. So we performed a virtual session in the spring, narrowing the topics down to 3. Yes, the ones that students wanted. Yeah, you know what? That's a really great thing to mention. Thank you, Jason. That a lot of programs that, and I know that your program is an especially large one. Some larger programs actually did narrow down the focus of what they worked on when they were virtual. So if, let's say, if you were one of those sites that would explore 3 to 4 topics, some sites actually pared back and maybe explored 1 or 2 topics instead, because in virtual time, it takes a little bit longer than it does when we're all together in person. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a really great practice. And you're not losing anything because you're maintaining the quality and you're still keeping students engaged. So if you have to make that kind of change, that's fine. And also you mentioned that students had a say in selecting some of that, and we also encourage that. You can always give them a short list. You don't have to give them a list of 25 topics, just give them a list of, let's say, 5, and then they get to choose 1 or 2, and they feel that they're part of the decision-making process. So those are all great suggestions, and I'm glad it worked well. And thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Okay, sorry, Stan. All right, we have time for a couple more questions. My apologies, I was trying to share one additional slide with you. There we are, okay. So I did want to remind you of my contact information as well. It's there if you do decide to get in touch. We would love to talk with you. We were thrilled to see how many of you responded and reached out for those meetings to have those conversations. So we want to continue to make ourselves available for any of you who want to do that. And last but not least, this is our social media tag. Thank you to those of you who are moving forward in all sorts of creative ways. If you want to share your good news with the rest of the Street Law community, and we certainly hope that you will, follow us on social media. At Street Law Inc. is our tag for the common social media platforms. You can scan the QR code and that'll give you additional information, and you can always do the old-fashioned thing and visit our website, which is streetlaw.org. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We wish you the very best of luck. We are really thrilled that we continue to have this opportunity to engage students. We reached a few thousand last year, even during the pandemic, and as it continues, we wish you all the best of luck. Stay safe. Thank you, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Take care.